Yep, you are good.
I always start asking questions right after I tell everyone to mute. so, um, yeah, so it's nice to meet all of you guys. I don't know how familiar any of you are with me or my company or my service, so I'll just start from the beginning and assume that you don't know much about it. But basically, I'm a partner in a financial services company. We specialize in tax strategy, and for the last 8 or 9 tax seasons, that's specifically tax strategy for people who've purchased residential solar. And we've helped, I don't know, probably 30,000 or so people who've purchased residential solar. So basically, what we do is we'll reach out to the customer at the point of installation. The first thing that we do is we let them know that there's a federal tax credit. Um, we don't talk a whole lot at the point of installation about it being a refundable credit or a non-refundable credit or a rebate. We leave that alone at the point of installation. But at the point of installation, what we do is an assessment on the system to see what additional incentives that client's going to qualify for. So we use a resource called DesireUSA.org. And DesireUSA.org is a federally funded nonprofit specifically for finding incentives for people who install renewable energy projects. And if you go to DesireUSA.org, you can type in the zip code and it will show a list of all of the incentives that are available in that zip code. This is a great resource for people who are selling solar because in most areas there's going to be 40 or 50 incentives available. But most renewable energy sales professionals usually only talk about the tax credit. They don't talk about any of the other incentives that are available, which is usually the tax credit usually represents, in most cases, not even half of the incentives that are available. So the first thing that we're going to do, and forgive me, give me just a quick reminder, what markets are we primarily dealing with here with the people on the phone, just real quick?
Primarily Utah.
Oh, primarily Utah. Okay, good. So that's going to be mostly Rocky Mountain Power territory with a few other smaller groups, but that's almost all net metering. In fact, I think other than Moon Lake Electric, I think it's all net metering. So that's a good one. I live in Los Angeles. I have for the last many years, but I was born and raised in Vernal, Utah. So I know a little bit more about Utah than probably your typical tax professional. So the first thing that we're going to do with your customers is we're going to do an assessment to see if their panels are being used in a trade, a business, or an income producing activity. Now, to be very clear here, I'm not looking to see if the building that the panels are affixed to are used in a trade, a business, or an income producing activity. I'm trying to see if the panels themselves are used in a trade, a business, or income producing activity. And what I'm specifically looking for here is interconnection to the utility. Are the panels connected to the utility? And if the panels are connected to the utility, is the utility taking your power generation or your net excess generation, and are they reselling it to their customers? And if the utility is reselling your generation, are you as a homeowner being compensated for your power through RECs, SRECs, a feed-in tariff, bidirectional metering, net metering 2, or net metering 3? And there are half a dozen others out there. But we'll just, for simplicity purposes, we'll call it net metering. And in Utah, they are. Rocky Mountain Power is absolutely buying power from that customer. And so because Rocky Mountain Power is buying power from the customer, those panels are being used in a trade, of business, or income producing activity. And that's really good news, because if you have equipment in America that's being used in a trade, of business, or an income producing activity, there's some pretty big benefits to doing that. The first is you have the ability to write off your loan interest. And that's a big one. You know, I used to always say that solar loans are a low interest rate, but they compound over 25 years. But they're not low interest rate anymore. The 1.9 days are long gone. They're much higher rates. But along with being a higher rate, those loans also compound out over 20 and 25 years. And so if you ever look at a truth in lending disclosure on one of these solar loans, the customers end up paying quite a large volume of interest. And like most loans, it amortizes, meaning that the interest gets charged up front. So if I have a $200 a month payment from like GoodLeap or Sunlight Financial or Mosaic or any of your typical lenders, I'm probably paying 191, 193, 194 each month in interest. And so what that means is for the first several years, my payments are going to be tax deductible. So that makes a really, really big difference. So if I'm buying my power from Rocky Mountain Power, how much of my payment is tax deductible? None, because the government has absolutely no programs whatsoever to buy more power from burning coal. There are no programs to do that because we don't need more of that. But what the government does need is the utility buying power from more clean, renewable sources. And so because you're selling your power back to the utility, you're going to be able to write off your payment for the next several years, 7, 8, 9 years at current interest rates. So that makes a big difference when you're selling solar. If the payment's even in the same ballpark, if it's even, if Rocky Mountain Power is 200, but it's 215 on your Mosaic loan, that 215 probably is going to be a much more attractive offer because you're already telling people it's a fixed rate. It's not going to go up. You're protecting yourself from inflation. But an even bigger reason is the payment's tax deductible. And it's really, really, really easy to sell homeowners on this. All you have to do is ask them. Because obviously if you're selling solar, it's 100% to homeowners. So you ask the homeowner, do you know anybody that rents? And they'll get real cocky about this. Oh, yeah, my little brother or my idiot college roommate. Yeah, crazy, right? Crazy to rent. Yeah, absolutely. And why did you buy your home? Oh, well, because one, I wanted the equity. And two, my dad and my uncle and my accountant and every smart person I knew told me to get the tax break. So it's the exact same thing. It is not hard to make homeowners understand this because they already pride themselves on understanding this. One of the main reasons that people purchase homes is for the tax benefit. And the same way that you can write off your mortgage interest, and almost all of the interest is charged up front on a mortgage, so your payments almost completely deductible for the first several years, same thing happens with solar. So now if I'm comparing solar panels that I purchased, solar panels that I purchased through a loan through whatever lender you guys use, we'll just call it GoodLeap, or I'm buying power from the utility, it makes a whole lot more sense to not buy power from the utility because the payment goes up, there's no protection from inflation, and you can write off your payment. That's a nice reason, but that's not the big one. The big reason here, I always tell our customers in-house here, if they ask about buying solar, I always recommend buying solar for almost anyone. And I do that for 3 reasons. The first reason is greenhouse gases. We have a problem with greenhouse gases in our country. I lived in Utah up until 2006. In 2006, I sold my company to a couple of TV producers here in Los Angeles. And I remember my wife and my 3 little daughters, they're grown-up daughters now, but they were little daughters then. And I remember dropping down the hill into just a cloud of grayness and thinking, should my daughters be breathing this? Should I be breathing this? Should anybody be breathing this? And so one of the reasons that I got into renewable energy is I live in a community that's very affected by greenhouse gases. Look at the smog in Los Angeles. And I don't want my daughters to live in that world. But that doesn't really affect me much. That's more for the grandkids. So the first reason I advise people to buy solar is because we do have a greenhouse gas problem in this world, and it's going to be a big problem for your grandkids. Greenhouse gases more than tripled in my lifetime. If that happens in your grandkid's lifetime, there's a real big problem. So that's the first reason. The second reason that I tell people to get solar panels is a hedge against inflation. You see, the problem with digging up coal, burning it, and selling it is it's really, really expensive, and things that are really, really expensive are subject to inflation. Then you have to run it down power lines that are 100 years old, falling apart. Most experts agree that over 50% of the power produced in this country gets lost in line loss. So that's the second reason. But the main reason I tell people to get solar, the reason, is the tax benefit. And I'm not talking about the tax credit. The tax credit helps offset your cost. I'm talking about the reduction in the actual taxes you pay. Because if you use equipment in a trade, a business, or an income producing activity, the cost is tax deductible. You can depreciate it and write it off through a program called MACRS. That's the Modified Accelerated Cost Recovery System. But don't call it that because it's too much and it confuses people. Just call it depreciation or call it MACRS if you want. But you can depreciate and write off the entire cost. And so what that means is if I have a $50,000 solar project, I get a $50,000 tax deduction if my equipment's used in a trade, business, or income producing activity like net metering. And that's big. So now I can go to a business owner and say, hey, you can now generate, if you buy these solar panels, you can now generate $50,000 of income and not have to pay any income tax on it. And that's big for a business owner because business owners pay quarterly taxes, which means every 3 months, business owners make no money because the government's charging them 25, 30, 35, 40% taxes depending on the tax bracket they're in. So the government's taking a third of their money every 3 months. So every 3 months, most businesses make no money whatsoever. So they are constantly, desperately looking for tax deductions. Now, if you're not a business owner, if you work for somebody else, your employer withholds the taxes from your income. So imagine you have $50,000 of income that they withhold income taxes on. That all gets refunded back to you now. And that's a big benefit. It's a huge benefit. And it's a real game changer. This is my 9th tax season in solar. I work with 30 or 40 different EPCs and solar dealers, and this will make a profound difference. You know, I've found that in the groups that I work with, it's hard to close much more than about 35% of the people you present solar to. Some of your rock stars will, but in general, you don't see actual close to fund more than 35%. And of the people who do close, 25% of those people cancel. In some groups, even more. And I believe the reason for that is because while I think most folks like the idea of saving a few bucks each month on their power bill, it's not a big enough emotional trigger to go $40,000 or $50,000 into debt. It just isn't. You know, I don't know too many people who can't sleep at night because they're worried about their light bill. I don't know people who are worried they can't send their kids to college or they're not going to get through retirement because of their power bill. But if you go to any financial planner in America, he'll tell you that the number one thing that you have to do, there are 2 monsters that you have to do to build retirement in this country. Number one is you have to beat inflation. I don't know why in the world balloons just flew up if I did that or someone did it, but that's cue the balloons again, somebody. But you have to beat inflation. That's number 2. But number 1, you have to beat the number 1 expense that 99% of Americans have, and that's your federal income tax bill. There are entire tax equity firms all across America. There are entire retirement planning companies that all they do is try to reduce tax debt. Because like I said, if I'm a business owner, once every 3 months, I make no profit because I have to pay my quarterlies. If I work for somebody else, my $2,100 check is $1,400. And that's the one that does keep people up at night. It's the biggest expense most people have. And with where inflation is right now, people need that money. So you create a situation where you buy $50,000 solar panels. Not only are you going to get hopefully an immediate and definitely long-term savings on your power bill, but you are going to get immediate and massive savings on your tax bill as well. And that is why I tell my customers to buy solar panels. The ability to hedge against inflation is nice. The ability to reduce greenhouse gases, that's wonderful. It's a great story for the grandkids, and the world needs it. But most importantly, you're reducing a monstrous tax bill immediately. So that makes a really, really big difference. So now when you're talking to a customer, you've got two bills. They're both about $200. One's going to Rocky Mountain Power. The other one's going to Sunlight Financial. What do I get for my $200 from Rocky Mountain Power? Last month's electricity. And what happens if I don't pay next month? The next month after that, you're turned off. Well, the $200 I paid to Sunlight Financial, I also got last month's electricity. But God forbid something horrible happen. How long is it before Rocky Mountain Power turns my power off? 1 month, maybe 2? How long do you think it's going to take for Sunlight Financial to come jerk the panels off the roof? Probably a lot longer. I'm certainly not advocating doing that, but I think it's obvious that on-site power is much more secure for the family. It's a better position to be in. Now, the next benefit is buying power from Rocky Mountain Power is all coal-burning power plants. It's dirty. It's not clean. Go to a coal-burning power plant and ask yourself if you want one in the backyard. You don't. The next benefit, the $200 a month I'm spending with Rocky Mountain Power, how much of that can I write off? Absolutely zero, because the world doesn't need any more of that type of power, so the government offers absolutely no incentive whatsoever to do it. But my Sunlight Financial bill, almost the entire thing is 100% tax deductible for the next several years because you're selling that power back to the utility. And then lastly, and most important, oh, sorry, I forgot one more. Inflation. You're $200 a month. You're an 81-year-old man. You're a single mom. You're a business owner. You're a millionaire. Doesn't matter. You don't want your expenses to be variable. You don't want them to be subject to inflation, especially right now. That $200 a month is going to go up year after year after year after year. I split my time between a couple of different states. I'm in Los Angeles, in my home in Los Angeles right now. Last month, I got an email from the gas company here, Southern California Gas, and it said, hey, by law, we have to inform you that if you opt into this specific program, we have to notify anytime we raise your gas bill by more than 20% in a single month. That's insanity. More than 20% in a month? But what is that? That's inflation. That's the world that we live in right now. So a huge reason that I always recommend to my clients to buy solar is to protect against inflation. With Sunlight Financial, or whoever the lender is, your bill's not going to go up. You're going to be stuck at that same $200 a month for the next 25 years. Imagine if you could go back 25 years. 25 years ago, I was spending 98 cents a gallon on gasoline. Imagine if I could lock that in. It'd save me $4,000 a year right now. Wouldn't that be awesome? Well, you can't lock in the price to fuel or energize your vehicle, but you can lock in the price to energize your house. And with where inflation is right now, you're absolutely crazy not to do it. And then the last benefit, your tax bill. How much of a tax deduction do you get buying power from Rocky Mountain Power? Absolutely zero. None. But how much of a tax deduction do you get when you buy solar panels and finance? It doesn't matter if you finance or not. The entire cost of the project. So if the project was $30,000, you get a $30,000 tax deduction. If it was $50,000, you get a $50,000 tax deductions. But for most Americans, that will be the largest tax deduction they take in their life outside of their mortgage interest. Unless, of course, you're a business owner. But for the average working American, that will be the second largest tax deduction they take in their entire life. take that money and use it to pay off your system and get rid of your bill altogether, or take that money and invest it into retirement. It makes an absolute profound difference. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about how to sell this. Before I do, does anybody have any questions? No questions?
I've got a question. This is Dennis. With the MACRs, right, the accelerated depreciation, can they take that in year one, or are there certain price point limitations on that?
Well, they used to be able to take it in year one with something called bonus depreciation, but that ended last year, 2 years ago, actually. Then last year was 2 years. This year it's 3 years. Most of the time, people don't have enough tax liability to, and I'm going to get into that in just a minute. So just call it, just take makers on a 5-year. So they're going to get that over that $50,000 deduction or whatever it is. Make sure people know it's over 5 years. You're going to take it over a 5-year period of time.
So, quick question for you. As far as us talking to customers, we're not tax advisors. How, and maybe you're going to talk about this, but how are you approaching this without giving tax advice?
That's what I'm going to answer next. Unless, does anybody else have any questions besides that? Because that's where I'm going from here.
Yeah, just real quick. Is there any literature about state-specific incentives like that within Utah, apart from, the obvious ones?
The only thing you're going to get in Utah right now is the federal tax credit, maker's depreciation, and the ability to write off the loan interest. But that's, I mean, on a $50,000 system, you're getting a $15,000 tax credit, a $50,000 deduction, and you're writing off the loan interest. You're already going to be running into that sounds too good to be true syndrome.
Hey, I have a quick question. Once we close them, because I'm actually pretty familiar with this process. I've done it in the past. How do we structure it, or is it after the deal's been closed and after their home's been installed? Is there a call that's scheduled? Do they reach out to you? How does that handoff work?
Okay, so I'll walk you through the process. So the first thing, when you're selling it in the home, it is important to keep this simple. I probably have 1,000 sales reps selling this for me right now. And I'll tell you the ones who fail and the ones who succeed. The ones who fail are the ones who make it too complicated. The ones who succeed and crush it, they're the ones who keep it simple. Most groups who start using my service are going to see anywhere from a 30 to 50% increase in closed conversions, and their cancellations are usually going to get cut in about half. So let me explain how you sell it. During the presentation, you talk about it the way that you always do, the normal presentation. But when you get to the tax credit part, you say there is a 30% tax credit. Don't call it a rebate. It's not a rebate. Make sure that people know that it's a non-refundable tax credit. It's a refund on the taxes that you pay in. Now, we're going to have a tax advisor that's licensed and specializes in renewable energy that's going to call you, prepare the forms, and give them to you with filing instructions for your CPA or the software that you use. Also, because you're selling power to the utility, because you're selling clean renewable energy to the utility, you have the ability to write off the interest payment of the loan, which means for the first several years, you're going to be able to write off the entire payment. And most importantly, the system cost, the $40,000 cost, that is 100% tax deductible. You are going to get a $40,000 tax deduction over the next 5 years. And again, we're going to have a firm prepare all of this for you along with filing instructions for your CPA.
And follow-up question with that, because technically net metering is considered an income producing depreciating asset, can they reap the benefits of the depreciation as well, or is all of this already entailed?
That's what the writing off the cost of the system is depreciation. That's
Okay.
Makers is a type of depreciation. It's the modified accelerated cost recovery system, but we rarely call it that. We usually just call it depreciation.
Okay. And what does MACR stand for again?
Modified accelerated cost recovery system.
Okay.
And you can
Thank
call it
you.
that if you'd like to. It doesn't matter. Their CPA will know what it is. So that's how you sell it in the home. Now, before I move on in the process, are there any more questions about how you sell it in the home? And I will be providing you with scripting, and we're even in the process of. My business partner he was in Disney movies when he was a kid. He's got a lot of film connections now, and we're in the process of filming our 2024 videos. Well, we have one that you can play in-house with the customer if you want. We have another one that you can leave with the customer. It really helps a ton with retention. Because a lot of people say, oh, wow, that sounds good, but it sounds too good to be true. So we leave a video where they watch a video with a licensed tax advisor explaining it as opposed to somebody who knocked on the door, and that can be a really helpful reinforcement. So before I move on, any questions about how to sell this specifically?
So I do have one last question. As far as I know, like we can show the numbers for payments reflecting the tax credit, assuming that they are applying that dollar amount towards the payment. Is this impacting payment at all, or is this specifically?
It does not impact payment, because with the tax credit, they take the credit and pay it back to the utility and put it back towards the loan. Or I'm sorry, not the utility, the lender, and put it back towards the loan. With all the money that they're getting back on writing off the interest and all the money that they're getting back in depreciation, that's just money that goes into their pocket. So this isn't something that they would, I mean, if they wanted to pay off their Sunlight Financial loan sooner, they could, but no, this will not affect their payment. So the tax credit will lower the payment. All these additional incentives will lower their tax bill by vastly more than their power bill was lowered.
And like to your point where you said, look, it's not a rebate, it's a tax credit. Can you just explain, based on their tax filing status, if they're a 1099 or a W-2 employee, what they're actually going to receive in the mail as far as the tax credit goes? Just so we don't, especially our sales teams don't confuse, just so they explain it properly, because
yeah, a tax credit's real simple. It's a refund of the taxes you pay in.
And at what point do they actually receive that? So obviously for 2024, they wouldn't get that or see that benefit until following tax season 2025.
Yes.
But how are they notified, and how do they know what exactly they can or cannot claim?
Okay, so once you've sold it, so does anyone else have any questions just specifically about the reps selling it? And then I'll move on to that question about when we reach out to them. All right, so once you've sold it to the rep, obviously you'll just make this a very simple part of your sales process. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. All of these people already bought a home. They bought a home because they wanted equity and they wanted tax deductions. That's why they didn't rent. It's the same idea here. If you just liken it to that, you're going to sell lights out. You just make it simple. So you keep it simple, your close ratio is going to go up dramatically. Now, we'll leave a video, a welcome video, once the customers, once you've signed the deal. Now, at that point, we don't do anything until it's been installed. We reach out, we reach out to them at the point of installation, and then we walk the customer through all of this. And when you have a licensed advisor going through all of these details, mapping it all out on paper for them, because we are an advisor and we can do that, your customers are going to be absolutely thrilled. They're going to say things like, how can this even be? This is too good to be true. You know, we're showing people how they can have their whole system paid off in just a few years, or how you can do whatever you want, but it's massive savings in your taxes, as well as over time, massive savings in your power bill. So people are going to be really excited when they talk to us. Now, at the end of that conversation, we're going to tell them our price. Now, when we first started this, it was expensive. We've helped tens of thousands of real estate investors since the late 1990s here. That's what we specialize in. When we first started doing this, we have to create a 5-year commercial schedule. We have to get all of their power bills. We have to calculate what they sold to the utility. Then we have to create that commercial schedule C. And then, by far most difficult, we have to send it to that person's CPA and write it in a way a CPA will understand, so the CPA doesn't say, hey, you can't depreciate residential solar. Well, it doesn't matter if it's residential, commercial. What the tax code doesn't say that anywhere. What the tax code says is that has to be equipment used in an income producing activity, which selling power to a utility is. So we prepare all of that for the customer and their CPA. Now, at the end of that call, the customer is going to be really excited. And we're going to tell them our cost is our regular advertised rate, which is $1,390. But then we say, oh, wait, hold on a minute. It looks like Elijah or Dennis is going to pay that for you. Now, our adder is nowhere near $1,390. It's less than half of that. But it looks like Elijah or Dennis is going to pay that for you. And the reason that they do that is because they work almost entirely off referrals. And so if you'd like to keep your credit card in your wallet here today, all you have to do is commit to get them a referral that goes solar within the next 30 days, which 100 out of 100 people will do. And then you call the customer back the day after we talk to them and say, hey, how did the phone call with the tax advisor go? And they'll say, my good, it was absolutely incredible. This is mind blowing. Like, it seems like it's too good to be true. And you say it is. Republicans tried to kill this off last year. They'll probably try again. But for 2024, we don't need to worry about that because those laws are already written and you do qualify for all of this. So we see here that you're getting a ton of money back, an absolutely incredible amount. We have to hire a firm to do a 5-year commercial schedule for you. That's really expensive for us, but we don't mind doing it. You know, our competitors just tell people that there are tax credits available, but half the people don't get them. But we hire a firm to make sure that not only do you get the tax credit, you get all of these incentives legally available to you, even though that's wildly expensive for us, because we want you to have the best experience with solar possible. By the way, have you thought of any referrals? And this creates a much, much, much better psychology, because first off, the biggest barrier to referrals is people want to see how it works out. But works out when? In a month, a year? When? Or just after a licensed advisor walks you through it and shows you the numbers real simply. They show you that you spent $50,000, but 15 grand is coming back to you in tax credits. And based on your the tax, you're in a 26% tax bracket. So another 13,000 is coming back to you in depreciation. Oh, and you're writing your payment off each month, and your payment's never going up. Wow, that's crazy. I'll have these things paid off in just a few years. And then I won't have a bill at all, just my connection fee. The customer is going to be excited. They're going to be happy. And that's a point to ask them for referrals. Plus, they'll feel obligated. The problem with solar right now is most solar reps either beg or bribe people. They beg them for referrals, or they say, hey, I'll give you $500 for each one. But both of those have pretty limited success. But if the person feels obligated, you're going to have a whole lot more success. That's just psychology. You know, if my best friend comes over today and says, hey, I just met the girl of my dreams and I need you to go out on a double date with me tonight. I'm going to say absolutely not. No, I'm not going out with some girl I don't know. No, I'm not doing it. And he begs, please, 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 please. I'm saying no. Then he tries to bribe me. I'll pay for the most expensive steakhouse in the city. Just please do this for me. Now he's trying to bribe me. I'm still saying no. But then he says, remember when I did it for you and Chloe? You're right. Because now I feel obligated. And your customers will too. Because it's not just a sales pitch. You did do something for them that is massive, that is huge, that is game-changing, that your competitors are not doing. Your competitors are putting people in solar loans that require they get a tax credit to pay it off, and 60% of the people don't even have enough tax liability to get the tax credit itself, let alone any other incentives. And there's no one there to help them do it. You really are going above and beyond, and you really are doing them a massive favor, and you really are helping them out. So not only is that going to help you sell a hell of a lot more solar, you're going to have vastly happier customers, and that's going to get you a ton more referrals. My little brother still lives in Vernal, Utah. And until about 4 years ago, he was a waiter at a chicken wing place, Wingers. Made good wings, but he's not much of an entrepreneur. He just never has been. But he started selling solar just a few years ago. And now he owns his own home. He has a mid six-figure income. There are only 2 employees in the whole company, my brother and his wife. My brother does not knock on doors. The idea is laughable. He's not a door knocker. And he doesn't spend money on Facebook to generate leads. 100% of his entire business is calling his customers the day after my firm talks to them and asks them how the tax call went and asking for referrals. That is his entire business. Now, so you've explained it to the customer in the home. At installation, we've explained it to them, provided them with paperwork so they and their tax preparer feel happy and excited enough to provide you with a referral. And then last of all, tax season comes around. Now, when tax season comes around, we have a guide. And that's what do you do in the situation you don't have enough tax liability to get the tax credit? Anybody have any idea what percentage of people have enough tax liability to get the tax credit the first year? People, homeowners who buy solar. Any guesses? Anybody?
20%.
It's about 35. So the other 65% of the people don't have enough tax liability to get the tax credit. And they go into their CPA. And they say, hey, I'm really excited about my $8,000 tax rebate. Everyone calls it a rebate. And then their CPA says, oh, it's not a rebate. It's a non-refundable tax credit. And the person says, what does that mean? And the CPA explains what it means. It means it's a refund on the taxes you paid in. And they say, well, after all my deductions and tax credits for my kids and everything, I only paid in like $2,000. Well, that's what you're getting back. But the $10,000 I was expecting, I'm only getting $2,000. Yes, that's right. And then they always say, well, the sales guy didn't tell me that. And then what happens? Well, some people are just hurt and upset. Some people complain. Some people threaten lawsuits and everything else. But it's an ugly, ugly process. It's by far the black eye of the industry. And it's something that should be avoided. Now, sometimes there are sales reps who are intentionally misleading and just tell everyone it's a rebate. But most of the time, that's not the case. I think most of the time, salespeople are genuinely trying to sell solar. They don't necessarily understand exactly how the tax credit works, and they're not tax professionals. So on your end, all you have to do to make sure that you're maintaining integrity is when you sell them, you make sure that they know that it's a refund on the taxes they pay in. And if the customer said, I don't pay taxes in, then you simply tell them the second payment on the loan. You know, the 2 different numbers, here's if you put the credit towards it, here's if you don't. You tell them the here's if you don't. But it still makes sense to do it because look at all these incentives you're getting. You can still write off your payment. You can still depreciate. You still get all of these incentives. It just takes time. Now, on our end, we have a guide in what to do if you don't have enough tax liability. The first thing that we do is we let people know that Section 25D of the tax code says to get the residential tax credit, you have to use the home as a residence. It doesn't say you have to own the home. It doesn't say the solar loan has to be in your name. It doesn't say that the utilities have to be in your name. It just says you have to use the home as a residence. It doesn't even say it has to be your primary residence. It just says you have to use it as a residence. So 25% of the time, this is going to clean up the problem, because the most at-risk group here is always going to be your low-income households. But the majority of low-income households have more than a single tax filer. So 25% of the time, we clean it up right there. Does grandma live here? Does Aunt Susie live here? Does your daughter and her boyfriend live here? Does another tax filer live here? And in many low-income households, another tax filer does. So 25% of the time, we take care of it right there. That won't happen if we're not involved in the process before they go to their CPA. Now, if the person doesn't have if the person doesn't have another tax filer living in the household, the next thing that we do is look for additional tax liability. The primary place that we do this is their retirement fund. Now, I always ask people, how much money do you have in retirement? $50,000, $100,000, whatever it is. Let's say they say $100,000. Most American homeowners have something. The next thing I ask them is how much of that is tax liability? And they always say, well, none. It's a 401k or an IRA. And 401k, which almost all, or an SEP, which is for self-employed people. But 401ks, IRAs, and SEPs all work the same way, and that's what 95% of your retirement plans are. There are no actual pensions anymore. And so people think you don't pay any taxes on those because you contribute to those tax-free and they grow tax-free. But what about when you withdraw? When you withdraw, you have to pay taxes. If you're 60 or older, you pay your regular tax rate. If you're younger than 60, you pay a lot more. So person has $100,000 sitting there. There's probably 25 or 30,000 of that is tax liability. Nobody ever thinks about that. And it's always going to be tax liability. It's going to be tax liability if you wait till you're 90. It's going to be tax liability if you wait till you're 105, or if you wait and die and leave it to your kids. It's always going to be tax liability. So we tell people, if you owe Goodly from Mosaic $8,000, it might be a good idea to draw from your retirement to pay that. And then that way your payment doesn't re-amortize and go up. It keeps the budget the same. And people always say the same thing. Oh no, I don't want to take the tax hit. You're not going to take a tax hit. You've got an $8,000 tax credit because you bought solar panels. So here you've got thousands of dollars of tax liability just sitting there. Here's a one-time opportunity to take that tax liability and use it to pay down your solar. Now, that takes care of the problem more like 70% of the time. It's a strategy that most people love, especially if they have retirement and realize how much of it is tax liability. If a person doesn't have retirement or they just really don't want to touch it, the next thing that we do is it does carry forward. And solar salespeople always say it carries forward 5 years. I don't know why they say that. It doesn't say that in the tax code. It carries forward until you use it up. So most of the time, it's not a situation where it's like, oh, I was expecting $9,000 and I got zero. It's I was expecting $9,000 and got $1,200. Well, you're going to get that $1,200 every single year as long as you have that amount of tax liability until the $9,000 gets used up. So if you're a little bit worried about the family's monthly budget, which you probably are, you're worried about your payment going up, well, just take that $1,200 that you get each year and set it aside in an account. That's going to more than cover that little bit that your payment went up that one time. And you'll get that every single year. We'll prepare, it's called a carry forward. We'll prepare the form to get the tax credit along with the carry forward for you and your CPA, or for you and the TurboTax or whatever it is that you use. So we'll make sure that it carries forward, and we'll make sure that you get it. And then at the end of that 6 or 7 years, you're going to realize something kind of magical just happened. Your payment did go up once, right in the beginning on month 18, but it never went up again. Not over the next 6 or 7 years. All those years you were getting that money from the government. It never went up. But your neighbors who are still buying power from Rocky Mountain Power, theirs went up 5 times. And that's inflation. And that's the last thing. If a person has no tax liability whatsoever, a person living on disability or Social Security, it's okay to sell those people solar. It's good to sell those people solar. Most of those people are on a fixed income, so they need to have fixed expenses. But let's just make sure that we're telling them that it's the second price, not the first price. And then that way we eliminate all of those problems. So what happens before, 6 or 7 out of 10 people don't have enough tax liability to get the credit. So they go to their CPA. And their CPA tells them what it is. And then the guy's mad. The guy who bought solar is mad. He said, oh, my sales rep lied to me. And the CPA reinforces it. Yeah, I see this like 10 times a year. That's not going to happen with us. With us, we're going to be prepared for that situation. We're going to have a technical letter of explanation, and the customer's already going to be aware. We've already intercepted and fixed that problem. So not only do we make sure that people get all of the incentives that are available, we make sure that they get the one that was already promised to them, which 6 out of 10 right now are not getting. And then at tax time, instead of having a whole bunch of angry customers, we again ask them for referrals because we're talking to them again. Excuse me. Yeah, the Santa Ana winds here in California, that always makes me cough and sneeze. But at tax time, instead of that being pissed off customer time, that's going to be another opportunities for referrals again. And that is a vastly superior way to sell solar. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I got one real quick. So when the tax credit starts phasing out after 2032, do they get the percentage at which it's phasing to, or does it always stay the 30% if they install during that time period?
Well, if we learned anything from Donald Trump, in 1995, he had $1 billion worth of losses. And he did loss carry forwards into the future, even though in the future they had higher tax rates. And the argument that he made was he was taking it at the 95 tax rate. So generally the way that it's done is on a carry forward, it's based on the tax rate of the year that it was in. So that brings me to one other point though. We do not prepare people's taxes. We prepare their forms, the filing instructions, and all of the advice that we have, and it's good. Our technical letter of explanation comes from Gate & Levin LLP. They're one of the largest firms in Los Angeles that specializes in real estate depreciation. Our technical letter of explanation comes from Hughes & Hughes. They're a law firm in Los Angeles. They specialize in IRS litigation. We have a private letter ruling from the IRS, and we have citations from energy.gov. Our process has been approved by the in-house counsel of SEIA. We are members of the Residential Solar Association. I myself am on the Sales Compliance Board. I mean, our list of credibility is long. And so when we give our information to CPAs, more than 99% follow it. But some CPAs some CPAs are kooks, but the vast majority will follow the exact advice that we give them. So to answer your question, I think it was Braden who answered that. The recommendation that we give, because unlike the commercial credit, it says you can go back a few years and forward several years at that year's rate. Well, we don't allow people to go back at all on residential because there's nowhere that says you can, but there's also no cap going forward, and we take it at the current 30% rate.
Perfect. Thank you.
I have a tendency of being long-winded with my answers, but that's the nature of that.
Hey, Jeremy, quick question for you with the tax liability, I guess. I've always operated in the assumption that if they are making about 50 or 60, assuming no crazy write-offs or anything, that's about where they should be able to qualify. Is there a certain range where, as far as income, where you see that they do qualify?
Yeah, that's a tough one. A few years ago, Jeff Bezos made $100 billion, but he had so many old loss carry forwards and credits that he had no federal income tax liability that year on $100 billion of income. So if he bought solar panels that year, he would have to do a carry forward because he wouldn't have anything to write it off against and no tax liability to hold it. But his receptionist who made $75,000, she'd probably be fine. So income is based on adjusted gross income, and that's your income after all of your tax incentives and your credits. So yeah, I mean, a person who makes $60,000 and doesn't have a lot of deductions will probably have enough tax liability that on an average American system of 4 kilowatts with the typical price could probably pay for it or have enough liability to get it. But it's just there's so much variability. It's in my mind, obviously I'm heavily biased, but in my mind it's crazy to not have a tax professional involved in the process.
Awesome. Thank you. Also, just real quick, I worked with Wes and Kira, so I know exactly who you're talking about.
You do? How do you know them?
I sold solar with them back in the day up in the Salt Lake area.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that is funny. Yeah, so you know his work ethic. You know he's not going out knocking on any doors. I'm sorry, who was it who said they knew Wes and Kira?
That was me.
That's awesome. Was that at One Solar?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, they basically ran all of Vernal. As soon as you said Vernal, I saw the name. I was like, "That's you got to be related." So I looked
Yeah,
up
he's my
Wes's
little
Facebook
brother.
real quick.
Yeah, he's my little brother.
I'm sorry.
That's funny.
No, they're good people.
Yeah, they are. Anybody else have any questions?
I got one more, and you may have answered it already. I got kicked off the call. My phone dropped it. But with the depreciating the asset, that's obviously in the form of a tax credit as well. Would you be carrying forward with it? How would that work if they can't even take advantage of it in the first place?
It's a smart question. It's not a credit though. It's a deduction. But same idea. It's based on tax liability. So on the tax credit itself, the tax code doesn't specifically give a limit on how long you can use it. So we just say it'll carry forward until it uses up. On equipment, you can carry forward up to the useful life of the equipment, which we consider 25 years. So I don't think we've ever, well, we haven't been doing this 25 years, but so yeah, it will carry forward until it gets used up.
Perfect. Thank you.
I have a question. Can the deduction be used for another family member or somebody who live in there, or is it just for the person on the contract or somebody who resides there?
Yes. So the deduction will be for the person who paid for it. So it's kind of interesting. The rules for a tax credit are for whoever uses the home as a residence. The rules for the deduction is it goes against the income of whoever had the expense, which would be the equipment.
Thank you.
As a quick follow-up to that, if it's the son that lives there, does he need to be a secondary on the loan, or can he be completely separate from that?
Not for the credit. It's funny. I get so many questions over at tax season. We just get 100 variations of the same question, and all we do is point them to the tax code. The tax code literally says in 25D to use the tax credit, you have to use the home as a residence. So we just ask them, do you use the home as a residence? Well, I did for 8 months out of you last year. It's where I lived when I filed my taxes. It doesn't, but yes, I've lived there for 12 years, but I don't pay rent. My name is not on title. The tax code doesn't ask any of those things. It simply says, do you use the home as a residence? And then, use some common sense. If Aunt Susie comes and stays with grandma for 9 months to take care of her when she's sick, and that's the address that she uses, yes, it wasn't her full-time residence, but you could probably just, imagine you're an IRS auditor looking at this. Did Aunt Susie really use the home as a residence? Cousin Eddie comes for 3 days over Christmas. Did he reside there? Yeah, I suppose. But did he use the home as a residence? Probably wouldn't fly. Because again, on anything that we do here, we don't have to get the IRS to sign off on it. But we have to get the customer CPA to sign off on it. So we need it to be pretty uniform, pretty concise. And so we have these laws and guidelines pretty dialed in. So before the customer goes to their CPA, we don't tell them you have to use it as a residence. We ask them, do you use it as a residence? Okay, well then that's probably what your CPA is going to ask too. We had a family in Park City, Utah. They owned a trust fund, and the trust fund had like 10 $1 to $3 million houses, and they Airbnb'd them all. And they put solar panels on them all, and they thought they were going to get the tax credit on all of them. Their CPA came and said, no, you're not getting a tax credit on any of these because the trust doesn't have tax liability, number one, and number two, you don't use these homes as a residence. You use them as Airbnbs. So we responded back, just what the tax code said. The tax code doesn't say they have to use it as a residence all the time. It just says they have to use it as a residence. So I would ask each family member if they use it as a residence. How often, I don't know, but I would ask. And then secondarily, the trustees have tax liability in the same way that tax liability would flow through to the trustees, so would the tax benefit. And so their CPA changed their mind and he filed it on every one of those properties, and it was like $1 million worth of solar. And he took the credit and the depreciation on all of it. So again, our job here is not to convince the IRS, it's to take what the IRS has already said and teach CPAs so we have the most advantageous and favorable position for the person selling and buying solar that we can possibly get while still operating within the parameter of what the law and the code says.
So essentially, as long as they're the primary, secondary, or a member of the trust, they can use the deduction then.
As long as the tax liability flows through to them on a personal level or a corporate level, as long as the liability flows through to them, in the benefit or the incentive would flow through to them as well.
Got it. Thanks.
So last thing that I'll finish up with, we went through a lot of deep, murky water here, and that's fine for understanding. I believe the best salespeople are the ones who understand their product inside and out. They're true professionals. I love those types of salespeople. But when they're selling it, they keep it simple and let the professionals be the professionals. So when you're talking to the customer, you get a 30% tax credit. That's a refund on the taxes you pay in. We have a licensed advisor that specializes in renewable energy that's going to help you and your CPA to make sure you get that. And then even better, because you're selling power to the utility, because you're doing that, you're going to be able to write off the interest on your loan, which means that your payments are going to be 100% tax deductible for the next several years. And then probably most importantly, the $40,000 cost, you're going to write that off over the next 4 years. $40,000 is 100% tax deductible. You'll write the whole thing off. That's $40,000 of income you don't have to pay taxes on. Or if you work for somebody else, that's $40,000 of income. You get all of the taxes that you paid refunded back to you. It'd be the biggest refund you've probably ever seen. Just because you put solar up. And you keep it just that simple. You know, I've got some teams in Utah right now. I work with G3 Solar. Their sales have gone through the roof. I work with Rise, who call themselves New Sun now. I was at Door to Door Con last month, and G3 Solar got recognized as the most improved company in door to door. The owner himself told me the number one thing they did was started putting my adder on every single lease and every single loan. The top sales guy of Rise came to my booth and he said that he increased his own personal sales by more than 50% by doing nothing more than adding this adder. But you have to sell it right. Fortunately, the right way to sell is keeping it simple. And I'll do more of these trainings with you and your teams.
I guess the next question is, what's the adder? Or is that something we should talk to our people about?
Yeah, that's something you'll talk to the EPC directly about.
Okay, sounds good.
Hey, Jeremy. Sorry, I know you were going to move on. I just had a question for you. So just so I understand the order of operations, so we sell the deal, and then you send out like a welcome email or video. You were saying, is that right? Is there a way to like verify? I'm just thinking of what the objections will be. Is there a way for their CPA to like verify it first with them before install, or when does that usually happen? Because I'm just worried about. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one. I wish we could be involved sooner. We can't for two reasons. One, we're in California. And in California, to be involved with solar sales, you have to be his license. We're not his license. All of our reps will be CPAs or CTECs. And that's CTEC is a license to prepare taxes in California. And we're licensed in all 50 states as well. But where we reside, there's certain licensing. So we can't get involved prior to the sale. And then the other reason that we don't do our consultation until installation is because we need to be paid. So we can get involved anytime you want in the process, but that's when we'll bill you. And most people don't want us doing that in the middle of the process, especially in the beginning before, the person might cancel. But that's why we provide you with ample training and the resources that you need, because most CPAs aren't going to argue with this. It's simple. Right now you avoid them. You try to avoid having them talk to their CPA until they go and do their taxes. Now you just try to avoid having them talk to their CPA until they get installed. And once they and their CPA talk to us, everyone's going to be happy. Unless it's a situation where you're calling credits rebates and things like that. But as long as you're following the teachings and the trainings that we give you, you're not going to have problems.
Awesome. Thanks.
Any other questions before we wrap it up?
I think that's it. Thank you so much, Jeremy. You're awesome.
All right.
We're excited.
Yeah, I enjoyed speaking with you guys here today. I look forward to working with you, and I can get some training materials out as soon as you're ready to start selling.
All right. Thanks so much. We'll get going.
All right. Thanks, guys.